Revelation chapter 21. 21. That's the one that comes right after chapter 20. Got that? All right. This is, I thought to myself when I got to this far, hey, this chapter is going to be real easy. And it is, but there's so much here. And yet I do want to get through it kind of in one session because it's just a unit. And you kind of hate to break units up. So we have chapter 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. Now the last few verses there in chapter 20 show all you can think of it is the terrors of judgment, the fate of those that refused to serve God, or did not serve God, or did not believe, or whatever. They were not God's people. So this chapter ends the history of a godless world. Chapter 20, the end of chapter 20 does, and the beginning of 21 shows, hey, it's all done, it's over, and it says so. And those that did not serve God, they were thrown into the lake of fire. It's done, it's through, it's over. So, if I like history, and if you read history, you study history a bit, man's history is a long, dark, dreary time for man with but few bright spots because of sin, because of refusal to serve God. And that's what happened beginning in the Garden of Eden. It just didn't get better because man refused to serve God as a whole. So now we come to splendor. The goal that you simply can't describe. God makes an attempt at it here in this 21st chapter. And so this chapter describes the eternal home of the saints. And it's a beauty beyond our ability to really comprehend and to even conjure up. But God makes a shot at it, and with that, we can also. So, we begin with the first verse. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there's no longer any sea. So, a great change. Is this a renovation? Is this an annihilation? And let's start over again? From nothing? Is it transformed? When you say new, well, we'll say Kenneth bought a new car. It was a 2005 model. That's not a new car. Well, it's new to him. Well, is that the new we're talking about? It's new to us. It isn't like we're used to. It says there's no sea. Well, we're not used to that. Or is it like we would like to think, say a donut? That's a new donut. That's the kind of donut I like, new. It's just been made. There's various ways you could express this. New. And as you look at this, a new heaven, new earth, remember, the Bible begins with heaven. Read Genesis 1, and the Bible begins with heaven. And then the Bible directs people to heaven. Now here we are. The Bible ends with heaven. A new heaven. So actually we have three things that are going to be new here in this. We have a new heaven and a new earth, and we also have a new Jerusalem. This will all come out in this. So, but this new heaven and earth. 2 Peter chapter 3, beginning with verse 10. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. Since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, what sort of people ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness? Now, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God. Now, since things are going to be burned up, Peter throws in this admonition. Hey, so you better behave yourself. What manner of persons ought we to be, since you see what's going to happen to all that we know about? Okay, hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be destroyed by burning, and the elements will melt with intense heat. But according to his promise, we are looking for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. Now, if there was a place where only righteousness dwelt, first of all, that would be new. That'd really be new. You ever been in a place like that? Everything is perfect. Everybody behaves themselves all the time. Yeah, well, okay. So this is just one passage of Scripture. There are many others. There are some from Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd, and there are some from 1 Corinthians, about chapter 14. But you take all of these verses and you kind of look at them and you get the idea that what we're going to have is a new heaven and a new earth. Now, conjure up in your own mind what you think that's going to be, but it's going to be new. That's the main thought here. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven, the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea. Now, sea, is that literal? No longer any sea. The sea is a mixed bag for us on earth. We've got to have it the way earth is. For life to exist, we need the sea. It's a part of our progression of things, especially with our water, but the sea. Or is he talking about the sea as a barrier between people? It worked very effectively that way for centuries. What does he mean? All right, but there's no longer any sea. Verse 2, and I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem. See, this is the second or the third new thing. The New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride, adorned for her husband. So this city is called the bride. It's the bride of Christ, according to verses 9 and 10, which we'll get to in a bit. But it's the bride of Christ that is the New Jerusalem. Now, it's coming from God. And this New Jerusalem is to be so beautiful, it's like a bride that has done everything conceivable in her mind to make herself beautiful for her husband, her groom. So whatever this New Jerusalem represents, it is going to be in the groom Christ is the groom, it's going to be absolutely beautiful. And of course, this is talking about the Lord's church. The church is the bride of Christ. If you will look in Ephesians, well, we're not going to this morning, but if you have your Bible, you can. It won't be up here. Ephesians 5 starts with verse 22, and it goes for a number of verses, describes the bride. And that's the church, and that's what it's saying. So this is the glorified heavenly church, the new Jerusalem, the heavenly church. There's also in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, it talks about it too. Now, there's a verse in Galatians chapter 4, verse 26. That when I first heard this phrase, I thought, what? I better look to see that is exactly what it says. That the church is our mother. Yeah. That's what it says. It said the New Jerusalem is our mother. The church. Okay.
It says the New Jerusalem's coming down from heaven, so after judgment and the saints are in heaven, and you come back down to this new earth.
Someday, Jerry, I'm going to take a couple of years and try to figure out a timeline. It's, you have to, in what aspect are you talking about end times? And what happens when exactly? And it's quite a long, I think it's a long study. And maybe it's a long study to me because I've never really tackled that one. I've come close here with Revelation. Part of the problem is these Jewish writers didn't pay much attention to chronology. If they had a timeline and they followed the timeline, we would, in our Western thinking, we would have no problem with it. We think chronologically, and we like things, 10 o'clock comes right after 9 o'clock and before 11 o'clock. But they just put facts down, and you were up to your own to try to sort it out, figure it out. And that's the best I can tell you right here. But that is a good thought to pursue. All right, so this is verse 2. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem. The present Jerusalem, is it a holy city? Well, you look at it that way, but not holy in the way it's going to be. It's going to be new. And it's coming down, thank you, Jerry, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. Well, the coming down part, does that mean it's going to come back down to a new earth? The new heavens and new earth. One of the descriptions of a new heaven and a new earth is the heaven. Well, here's the earth. It's been made new, renewed, new, however. But you look up at the stars and they're new. Either one commentator said, well, they won't be in the same place because of whatever reason. It's new. I wouldn't go there too far, but that's possible. All right? So we have this glorified heavenly church. Verse 3, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. So this tells us that the condition which once existed in the Garden of Eden will be restored. God will be with us. Sinless man, new heaven, new earth, saints only there. Sinless man in the garden had fellowship with God. In the New Jerusalem, in the church that's in heaven, be it come down to earth or if you have visualized somewhere else, the church will once again be in immediate fellowship and companionship with God, because that's the way it was in the beginning. When God created man sinless until man sinned, now all that's been taken care of. We're back in fellowship and companionship with God, and that's verse 3. The tabernacle of God is among men. He'll dwell among them. They'll be his people. God himself will be among them. So we have the presence of God, and we have, he's going to get here in the next verse, we have not only the presence of God, but we have the absence of all that's bad and hurts, the pain, the sorrow, the death, and so on. And he'll start mentioning that, because God himself is among us. So he does say in verse 4, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away. There will no longer, he'll wipe away every tear from their eyes, because he's taken away everything that causes tears. And so the tears they're wiped away, they won't return. And the first thing he mentions is what? Is it up there? Oh, he's gone too far past me. Okay. Death. There will no longer be any death. Death hits every home, every life, every family, every congregation. Death. Death causes tears. It's the way we look at death. There are some deaths when we might rejoice, but no, we keep that down. I'm old-fashioned enough to, when a person has died, I don't celebrate. I know sometimes we call it a celebration of life. The old-fashioned folks call it a funeral. Somebody has died, and that causes tears. Oh, Luke, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just noticed in the Bible, a lot of times death and separation are very similar concepts, and I think that's another aspect of not having any death. There'll be no separation.
Yeah, I tried to express, after our son was killed, one thought that came to me was, there's never any more again. Christmas, never again with him. Not going to be. No more hugs, handshakes, greetings, voice on cell phone. Yeah. You can imagine the shock I got one day when the phone rang at home, this is after our son had died, and a doctor on the phone said, we're calling to ask how your son is. Big burden. What? And he did not know that my son had been killed. And of course, when I explained that, he apologized, and so on. Death means so much to us. It was the first thing that God told Adam and Eve. Listen, if you eat of the fruit of this, you're going to die. It's the first thing, first clatter. And it means so much to us. And on the way to death, even, there will be no longer any death, any mourning because of death, or crying or pain. Pain sometimes is on the way to death. Sometimes it's not. In fact, most of the time it's not. It is a reminder. You're going to die. It's a reminder. But hey, look at this. The first things have passed away. Forget all of that stuff. You're going to be where it won't be a part of things. It's gone. Death is gone. It's gone, gone, gone. Where'd it go? The lake that burns with fire. Yeah. Death is gone. That's where it's been put. Hades, the place of the dead, has been put there. That's not going to happen anymore. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It did happen, but not anymore.
Academically, I've always, in the past, tried to study what this new heaven and new earth is about. And I always come to Revelation 21. And there's Job's witnesses, of course, talk about how you re-inherit this earth and it's going to be perfect and everything else. And they make it, what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
As part of their doctrine, and that you're not going to go to heaven because you're here. Then I get to Revelation 21, and I'm like, I could care less. I don't care what this new heaven and new earth is, because I know God is there, and all this great stuff is there, and ultimately, we have it really good, whatever this new heaven and new earth is all about. And I think this is just perfect.
Sure.
Whatever that might be.
You see, if we could get rid of death, and if we get rid of our mourning, our crying, our pain, well, wherever we are, it's got to be a vast difference from this. Because this is the time of the first things. But these first things, poof, they're gone. They passed away. Then we get to verse 5. And he who sits on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. See, the old things passed away. He who sits on the throne does this. I am making all things new. And he also said, Write, John, note this, John, be sure you write this down. Now, this is about the third time he's told John for sure to write. So write, for these words are faithful and true. So it's an emphasis. These are wonderful things to follow, John. Write them down. They're true. And he said these words are faithful and true. What words? Well, the words he just said about how good it's going to be, because, in large part, because of the absence of some stuff.
You think when it says, I am making all things new, it could be referring to the process of salvation in individuals throughout history, or is he talking about just that? I know the New Jerusalem is a church, so he's making all things new. Is that if he meant in Christ as a new creature?
It wasn't not about salvation. That's etched in stone, way back.
But I'm just saying, like, that could be part of the
Yeah, you're on a different plane there somehow. Yeah, making all things new. All things that we have, he's made so that they're, instead of like they used to be, they aren't like that now. They're new. They used to be, and he describes some of it, the death in the morning, the pain. They're not like that. They're new. And we have better things to look forward to, and he's going to describe them here after a while in this chapter. How these new things are just so perfect. And in our mind's eye, visualize a city that is just dazzling with color, with music, with persons, starting with God himself. And I mean, the value of it all, he tries to tell us how valuable it is. Like, why the streets are paved with gold. Yeah, the city is a gold city. And now gold is all well and good, but what he's doing with the gold part is, that's the most valuable thing we can think of. And he talks about a stone of jasper, but he's describing a diamond, and a diamond is absolutely huge and perfectly clear. If you look through a jeweler's magnifying glass, you'll see most diamonds have some kind of imperfection, a flaw. Not there. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Everything is that way. Okay. But it's new. And when we get there, we'll understand it as he wants us to. So, I am making all things new. And he said, right, these things are faithful and true. Then in verse 6, then he said, now this is the third said, right here close. There's two in verse 5, and here's another said. So he's talking, and we need to listen. It is done. It's done. What? What's done, Eric? That's what I thought. Yep. What? What's done? A word that came, and I think this word has, it's pretty close. Time. Time's done. Time is a created thing, you know. Back in Genesis chapter 1, time was created. It's done. Time is no more. It's done. Everything that had to be taken care of, all the details, all of it, it's done. Time has run out. Everything that was going to be done has been done. It's done. I don't know of another way to really express this, but I think this is it. It is done. Then he says, you see, I'm the beginning and the end. I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, beginning and end. It's done. I will give to the one who thirsts from the spring of the water of life without cost. From the Garden of Eden, that's what he'd been aiming for. So we could go back to the river of life there in the heaven of God and have it for us again. Later he'll talk about the tree of life. So the river of life, the tree of life, they'll all be there. It's done. So I'll give to the one who thirsts. Verse 7. He who overcomes will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. And verse 8, but for the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and immoral persons and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars. Their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Boy, and there is no greater way to show something than to compare it right alongside of its antithesis. We've just been talking about no death, no mourning, no crying, no pain, and all the wonders of it, and it's done, and the tree of life is there, and the river of life is there. And then we come up with verse 8. 8 things, despicable things, awful things. We're contrasting the good with the bad, the saved with the lost, those who have value and character as opposed to the opposite, the cowardly. There's basically 8 sermons here. We don't have time for 8 sermons in the next 15 minutes. But I have to, cowardly. There are people who leave the Lord's church because they say, well, I just couldn't keep up with it. I'm kicking. And like the phrase goes around, suck it up, buttercup, and get with the program. The cowardly. Well, people will pick on me. What do people say? Well, I don't know if I could do that. And God has never, ever, ever asked anyone in all time to do something they couldn't. Never. He even asked Abraham to go out and kill his son. And Abraham headed off to do it. And to prove the point, God sent his own son. Okay, the cowardly. And right along with the cowardly, and it just comes next, and in the right place, unbelieving. That's what causes us oftentimes to be cowardly. We just don't believe in God, in his power, in his might, in his protection, in his glories and his wonders, and what he's given for us. And then abominable and murderers. You know, if you look at the news, you see the way people treat each other, and it seems like it's particularly awful when certain crimes or certain things are done. When an adult will beat a child to death, the helpless, innocents beat them to death. Then haul them down to a hospital and say, fix them. And the doctor says, I can't. And immoral persons. It was on the news on my phone news just today about there's the groom-to-be, and he had taken one of the bridesmaids aside 2 days before the wedding, and the bride-to-be walked in on them. Immoral. Well, sorcerers, those who delve into the witchcraft, and it's everywhere. idolaters, setting something up that is far more important than God would have us have as important. In our country, and largely in the world today, the thing of idolatry, yeah, I saw a picture. It was over 100,000 people. They were all gathered together for one event. A ball game. Athletics can be idolatry. Oh, yes, it can. And it is so often placed above God by Christian people. It must not be. For it comes in this list. And then this, the last one, it's, boy, it looks like, what's it doing in this list of things that are so very, 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 very bad? Liars. Well, because it's so very, 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 very bad. It's like a guy that will beat a child to death. Lying. That's what happened in the garden. That's what got everybody in trouble. The devil lied. And he's the father of liars. So, there it is. Cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, immoral persons, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars. All liars. Their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. It's the death where death went. It's that bad. All right. Verse 9. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." Now, it's not going to come up on the screen, but if I went back to chapter 17 and verse 1, then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits in many waters." So one of these, I don't know if it's the very same angel, but it sure could have been. There in chapter 17, he says, "I want you to show this terrible, terrible thing." He calls her a whore and all kinds of despicable things. And she's the apostate church. And John, I want you to see this. And now up here, in verse 9 of chapter 21, then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues came and spoke with me, saying, here's the opposite. "Come here, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." How wonderful it is, and the difference that is called out here. And then it goes to verse 10. "And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God." Now, we talked about the New Jerusalem, and it's called the Holy City, and it's the bride of Christ coming down from a well, he says there in verse 9, "I'll show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. He carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain." When you really want a view, you want to get up. And it's the one nice thing about getting on a cattle car, an airplane, and taking a flight and looking out and seeing. boy, you can really see a long, long ways from 30,000+ feet. Anyway, a great high mountain. I once climbed Mount Shasta, 14,162 feet. That last 162 feet, you want to say that because it's the hardest. But from there, you know where it is? In Northern California, way North California, all right? And kind of centrally located between the ocean and Nevada. You can see the ocean. You can see Nevada. You can see, if you have binoculars, I did, you can see houses way to the south on hills, San Francisco. And of course you can see Oregon real easy. A great high mountain. You want to see something? You get up on a big high mountain. John was taken on this in the spirit, not physically, in the spirit. He was taken to this great high mountain so that he could see the glories of the church. Oh, yeah. We just don't know how great in God's eyes the church is. When God wanted to show off to John, he showed John the church as it was going to be in eternity. John, you really want to see something? You want to be dazzled? I'm going to take you up on a high mountain, and I'm going to show you the church, the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down from heaven from God. Having the glory of God. This is verse 11. Having the glory of God. That's light. That's shining. That's dazzling. Her brilliance was like a very costly stone, as a stone of crystal clear jasper. That's the stone I told you about a little bit ago. Like a huge diamond that seems to enhance light. It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and names were written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel. There were 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, and 3 gates on the west. And the wall of the city had 12 foundation stones, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So, gates named to show the true Israel of God. There were 12 angels. We can assume one with each gate. What were they for there at the gates? Were they there as guards? They were in the Garden of Eden. You did not get by an angel. And as guards, they are the it, nothing greater. Or were they there to help? The foundation stones. 12 apostles. Why 12 apostles? Because the church, I don't remember that's what we're talking about here, the church is founded on the apostles and prophets. That's Ephesians chapter 2, verse 20. The church that's its foundation. That's where we go. When somebody asks you, well, what does the church believe? Well, let me point you to our foundation as given by God through these 12 foundation stones. The names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel have to do with the gates. There were the 3 gates on each side, times 4, that's all 12. The foundation stones, there's 12 names, 12 apostles. And then we get to measuring. We use measurements in our daily life. I made hotcakes this morning, and I very carefully measured to the very grain how much pancake stuff you put in, you know. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. How much oil? That much. Eggs are easier. 1 egg is exact, and so on. A little buttermilk. That's enough. Well, my wife ate it. If Talisa were here, I think she ate the one that was left. Measurements. All right, measurements are important. That's why God had measurements. And he did it to the church. And he does it to heaven. And we're going to talk about that next week. Thank you so much.